Hey everybody, welcome back to the Driven Hunter Podcast, brought to you by Mission Crossbows. This is part 2 of the season. What a season it was this past year. We're talking about the season. We're going to be showing video examples, so watch the video version because you're going to get a sneak peek into what you would see on TV later on in the year. But we have just started to cover some of the season. We've went through 3 hunts. We talked about Northwest Territories and what luck we had up there hunting big mountain caribou. We discussed hunting big elk in Kentucky, which I shot could be the new potential state record. And then we also talked about the epic moose hunt we had in the Yukon, which was unbelievable. So if you hadn't listened to part 1, make sure you do that because there's a funny story about Nicole and her phobia with mice in there that you won't want to miss. Plus she shoots her first ever archery bull at 4 steps. Probably one of the most exciting hunts that I've ever filmed by far. And now we're on to whitetail season, which was an amazing season in itself. And that really started kind of in that mid-October range. And the kids were already on fire, weren't they? I mean, they were already laying them all down when we were already gone.
Yeah, it seemed like every time we left, we were getting text messages that they were getting them on the ground. So,
no, they shot some big ones. I mean,
they did.
It kind of started with Brandon because Brandon Carson wanted to film Brandon, and he loves running the camera.
Yep.
So they're hunting on our ground here in Minnesota, and I kind of give them, here's the hit list bucks that you guys can shoot. And sure enough, one of these big mature 8-pointers that we had that we really wanted out of there because he was a bully buck. And he came in and Carson laid down great footage and he stopped and Brandon made a great shot. And, they were so pumped. I remember
that kicked off our whitetail season for us.
Yeah, that really got things motivated.
Yeah.
And I should back up because kind of had a downer start to my whitetail season because I put so much time and effort in the summer preparing to hunt this one particular buck on our property that it kind of blew up overnight. We had another piece of property that's away from our home farm here that we generally use just for hunting, friends and family and whatever, can shoot pretty much any buck over there. It's not a really highly managed piece. Well, all of a sudden this buck that we had is a 3-year-old 8-pointer he had little G4s, so he really was kind of a 10-pointer, but he had stickers. He was a nice deer. He's like 140 as a 3-year-old last year. I checked the trail, I checked our stealth cams, and I almost passed out. I showed Nicole, I'm like, you got to swear to secrecy. And I'm going to show you this picture. And when I showed you that picture, you're like, oh my gosh. This buck, it just blew up. And he had tons of scoreable points and huge for 5x5 frame with all these extras. And I figured right away, immediately, that he was well into 200. We didn't know exactly how big he was, but we got a bunch of pictures of him. And I put a muddy blind out on this edge of this field system. I created an interior food plot of standing beans. I went and took a hot fence or electric fence system, and I fenced all the beans off except for a little portion of them to protect them so they didn't get overbrowsed. I put so much work into trying to create a little honey hole that would pull that deer into that mid-October range where I could get him on the beans.
When you were there, yeah.
Yeah, when I was home. And we were coming back from the Yukon, which we just
no cell service for 10 days.
Yeah, we're thinking about whitetail hunting, and I'm so pumped because I now got this moose out of the way. Can't wait to get home and start whitetail hunting. And as we start to descend and come in, service just starts to hit our phones, and my phone's a bloop, 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 bloop. It's bleeping out of control and blowing up, and I'm like looking, and I'm like, did you see this buck killed in southeastern Minnesota? And I'm like, I didn't even want to look
instantly.
At it. They got him. And sure enough, the neighbor got him, which turns out to be a great deal because the gentleman's fighting cancer, and he just deserves to get him.
Right.
But he was a monster. He put on 100 inches in 1 year.
That's like almost unheard of.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always those select deer. Right. There's always those select bucks that do that. But looking at that deer last year, would you have ever thought that
No.
deer was going to blow up 100 inches?
It's,
And a lot of people might say, are you sure that that's the same deer? But sheds off of the deer from the year before, all that.
we know all
for
our
sure.
deer really well. Yeah, it was totally the same deer. He just really blew up. And if you see the video version, we'll try to put an example of when he was a 3-year-old to when he was a 4-year-old. And the guy that got him, gentleman got him, they cut his teeth, and they had him definitely aged at 4.5, and they knew what he was too. But anyways, that kind of put a dampener on my whitetail hopes. But the kids started strong. Olivia then, after Brandon.
Yep. Shot her first
archery buck here on our place on a water hole that we put in, which was really rewarding. She was so excited because she's the archery manager at a retail store called Shields. And she talks bows and talks hunting every day.
And it's unbelievable now that she does what she does for a living. She doesn't get to hunt as much, right? So her to be able to actually be out in the tree stand and be able to harvest her first deer with a bow is pretty cool, her buck. So that was awesome.
She can talk the talk, but she now can walk the walk.
Absolutely.
So, and Brandon, her boyfriend, had got a nice buck already on the ground. Well, then Carson started hunting. And as luck would have it, he was hunting with our good friend and team member Randy Baker, and Jared was filming them, and they went over to Randy's property, and Randy had this buck kind of on a pattern, and he had another target buck he was hunting, so he said, "Carson, come on over." I mean, great team member, right?
Right.
He never calls me when he has a big one spotted, but he called Carson, and Carson, him get along great, and first night in, this big one comes walking through, and Carson snort wheezes his buck in, which is pretty impressive. He had enough, intuition to, like, as the buck was leaving, to challenge him with a snort wheeze and turn the buck around on a dime, and he comes right in and he smokes him at 15
Hey, Carson's
yards.
A kid that'll throw anything but the kitchen sink at a deer, though, to get him to come in, and it worked. I mean,
he got it done.
It's time to be aggressive, and he was, and it worked for him.
Yeah. I mean, he could have just blew that deer out of the country, but he got it, and then he was like,
Made
"See, Dad, shot. Every time you guys are gone, we can kill them." And sure enough, I mean, it held true.
Right.
So then it was our time to try to start whitetail hunting. We didn't hunt a lot at home early season like we normally hunt water holes.
Well, Minnesota has a dedicated youth weekend. So we hunted with the kids that youth weekend. And, and that was kind of, it was iffy weather this year. And Jace got one on the ground, though, during that weekend.
Our good friend Jace Schumacher, Chad and Amy Schumacher's son, who was hunting the youth
So he kind of kicked off for the youth, the younger youth kids.
Yeah, he got the first one on the ground with a shotgun, so he was pretty excited. So all the kids were fired up, and we kind of went out and we did it as a group, and it's just a family get together.
And I had Ava, and it was her first time ever deer hunting. So
and the Ava story we'll talk about in a minute because she's a special person to us. I mean, we just hunted the youth season, and after the youth season, we left and went to Alberta.
Yep.
And we had mule deer tags to go spot and stalk mule deer archery hunt. Mule deer, and we're going up with Blue Brana, and we've hunted with them many years and have great success hunting with Glenn and Donna. They're kind of our family, extended family.
Absolutely.
And
we're on an all-time high right now. We've had success. I mean, and Glenn was like, "You guys are hitting it right up here."
It's going to be a good week.
Right.
And then the brakes came on, like on.
Heavy brakes.
Yeah. It was like, God didn't want us to have success that week because he threw everything at us but the kitchen sink. I mean, it started off where we had, for 3 days, we had 40, 50 mile an hour winds, which buried the big deer in these deep coulees.
They weren't even moving.
You couldn't see them to even bet them in the morning. Yeah. They weren't even moving, so they were just buried. And then after that wind blew through, then the snow came, and we got about 1.5 inches, 2 inches of crusty, wet snow, which it made it impossible to stalk. We put on several close stalks, but in the end, it just wasn't enough. And they zigged and we zagged, and it just it was so
It was
frustrating.
like the first hunt of the season that we were like, and it wasn't from lack of effort. It was just the weather elements just totally threw us a curveball. Yeah.
Yeah. And we just couldn't pull it together. I mean, no matter what we did, again, it just wasn't
We hunted
working.
our rears off. I mean, we did.
To the very end. And
Right.
I said this to you when we left. I told Glenn this too. I was like, this is one of the first hunts that we've ever did that both of us hunted separately that
And
hard
did not
and
get anything.
did not hang a tag on
Yeah.
something. So we came home with no show.
Right.
And that, you know, people ask us, well, why don't you put that on air? And we always like to try to put success on there as well. But we might air that in a Q1 or Q2 show down the road if we need it for content.
We've had so much success there in the past. I mean,
did
it's
see
just been
some
crazy.
We've seen some giants. And like 2 days in a row, like one day, Nicole sat on a mule deer that she had bedded all day long with no food, no water, freezing to death, just to wait for the buck to stand up and move into a shooting position. And then the buck vanishes.
Slipped out of the back door, and we never
even seen him.
saw him.
And then
Started to get dark. We're like, this deer's got to get up at some point.
never did.
And never did. And we walked up there and wasn't there.
Same thing for me. We were set up on a buck on the very last day. I figured I finally had this joker figured out because we watched him go in bed, filmed it all. This buck gets into a position and bed's kind of right behind this little point. And we sneak up there and into position. We were so confident that my guide left his shoes way back 150 yards away.
Might I say, yeah.
We stalked up there. He's like, don't worry, this ain't going to take long. We get up there. He stays bedded. And we're there at like 8 o'clock in the morning. At 2:30, 3 o'clock, I see the buck coming, his horns. I'm like, get ready, here he comes. He had stood up out of his bed. And he moved through a little bit of an opening, which I don't know if I could ever got the shot. I maybe in hindsight should have, but we felt he was going to come out more in the open. And then we figured he just rebedded because he disappeared again. In actuality, he slipped out the back door on us and kind of went down this little drainage.
And you guys sat there till
We
dark.
figured he was still bedded there.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, right before dark, we look up and he's half a mile away with a doe. We're like, are you kidding me? And that's just the way that whole hunt went.
Right.
So
wasn't from lack of effort. We tried.
Oh, I'm
and you'll have
exhausted
hunts
thinking
like
about
that.
it.
I mean, we've had so much success there in the past, right? That, it's just part of hunting, and it was fun. And the people that, we get to share camp with, Glenn and Donna. Glenn was just so frustrated too, because we were just trying our hardest and giving it our all. But boy, the weather elements were not making it easy on us. So.
And my guide, Josh Johnson, which is, my lucky charm, I always call him, because we've always shot so many big things together over the years. I mean, he was just as frustrated.
Just couldn't believe it, right?
Couldn't believe it. But in the end, they just...
Blue Brana ended up having a banner year.
Yeah, it turned on
It was
after
Pat
that.
and Nicole's luck that week. It wasn't them.
That was the only that was the only week they did not have success. They shot some monsters and
Unbelievable
really
giants
had a
this year.
great season up there. But we're going back.
That's right.
This year.
Redemption.
Yep. We're gonna go back and we're gonna archery hunt with them early season this year, which is gonna be fun to do, and looking forward to that. But so after we came home with our tails tucked from mule deer, going, I hope the whitetails are gonna treat us better. And we turned around and we went right up to Saskatchewan, and we went hunting with, of course, our family and extended family, home away from home, buck country outfitters, Dean and Janda Kuipers.
Yep.
And Johnny and all the guides up there. This place is our staple to our season every year.
I mean, 13 years now, I think we've been hunting up in Saskatchewan with those guys. I mean,
it is.
It's just unbelievable. Like you said, it's home away from home. It's a hunt we always bring Cashton on. It's just family, right? When we go up there, and it's always just a fun time for us to just go up and see everybody. And there's nothing like hunting in the Canadian, in the middle of the Canadian
there's monster
wilderness.
bucks that live there. That's the overall goal, and it always has been. I always love hunting Canada because you just never know what lurks in that big wilderness country, and those deer get aged. And
every day the guides were coming back saying, I got new deer on camera, on our trail cameras.
So yeah, I just love hunting there, and every year we've had great success there. The last year I shot one of my biggest bucks ever. That was in the high 180s.
Yep.
So I was looking forward to going back this year. He had a lot of great trail cam pics of some big deer, and a couple particular deer that we were going to target. and one was a Big 10, which you obviously know really good now because you're in the right spot. I started out hunting that deer, and then he vanished, which happens. So as the hunt went on,
Yeah, you know what? I want to kind of know something. Why is it always you get on the bigger deer and I get on the lesser of the two?
yeah, how come
But
everybody always?
I think it all circled around this year on you because I.
How come everybody always says? How come your wife always shoots them? So I don't want to hear it. Actually, I mean, we're sounding like
I have to give you a
somebody
little
else.
grief.
Anyways, right. It sometimes happens that way, but yeah, you should have nothing to complain about because your wall is pretty impressive.
That's right.
This year, we were hunting all week up there. And really, what happened was it came down to the last final 2 days of the hunt, and I'd had a kind of a mature 9-pointer that had tall brows coming in. He was wide. He really wasn't super long tine, but a great deer and fully mature. And I decided if he come in, I was going to take him.
Right.
And then you went hunting the deer I started out hunting with, and you were like rolling the dice. You're like, well, it's because we found out that he had moved.
Right.
He had relocated across the river.
He had swam across the river. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, and we just by trail cameras, by stealth cams, we figured out his puzzle, and we kind of figured out his travel route and where he was living. So then you went after him. I said, well, I'm going to go hunt this big 9. And second to last day, the big 9 came in. We were completely, the wind was terrible for us, but we felt like, well, we don't have any option. I mean, we had taken, and we had our zero trace unit out there. We were running, scent elimination stuff going on. We were
your nose jammer. You just had everything.
We were trying everything we can
Right.
to try to not get picked off, and the deer were coming in. I mean, they were a little nervous that something was wrong coming from that blind, but they were still out in front of us. And I saw that buck coming in. I'm like, oh, here he comes. Please let him come in. And he was cautious. But I think without, running the zero trace and nose jammer and stuff, we wouldn't have got the shot. And the buck comes in, and he's like nervously cautious, but he still wasn't picking us off. He couldn't smell us. And he walks in, and I pull back, and he had his shoulder back, and I'm like, forever. And I'm thinking to myself, he's not going to stay in that position. He's just going to get too nervous and wheel and run out of there and never give me a shot. So I'm like, I'm shooting him. I'm going to see what this NAP is made of. So I shoot, and I was shooting that fixed blade head, the Hellraiser, and I drive that arrow into him, and it hits his opposite shoulder, and it shocked him. Like, I've never seen a deer react like that. It just blew him over. He tried to get up. He spun a circle, and he fell right back over.
Right.
And, I mean, I saw the blood. I'm like, oh, my gosh. And it was kind of graphic, but it was kind of like, wow. Right. I mean, just pretty impressive of what kind of, force that arrow has. And I just quickly reloaded another arrow and finished him off, and I had the 9-pointer on the ground. And then, so that's the end of the second day. You come in, you didn't see your deer.
No, I sat there all day long in the muddy blind, and he never came in.
Now, this is what, 5 days in a row?
Yes. Yeah.
All day?
Yeah. All
how
day,
many
every
hours?
day, from sun up to sundown. I don't even know how many hours it
Probably
is.
50 hours.
Yeah, but I'm saying like 11, 12-hour days in a blind. But
That's
yeah,
a lot of time.
So this was day 5, had not seen hide nor hair of him.
And I'd hunted him the first couple days.
Right.
Nothing.
So our plan was, I had no cell service back in there and no radio or anything. So our plan was, I told him, like, my back was shot. My body was shot. So I said, noon, just come in, check on us, and then go back out. So it was about 11:15, and we were sitting there. I was reading a book to pass time, and all of a sudden we look up, and there he is. He's there. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. It's like shock at first.
He's right in front of you.
Yeah, it's like shock at first when you first, you just sit there for 5 days, sun up to sundown. Your hopes, everything just kind of get down in the dumps.
I see my deer coming in. I don't know about you. Obviously, you don't.
Obviously, we didn't. I
don't read a book, though.
I think Aaron was reading a book or on his phone or something, too, playing a game. You're just trying to pass the time, 12 hours in a blind for 5 days straight. And all of a sudden he's there. And so, I slowly grab my bow and, of course, draw back and I let that arrow go. And I remember Pat telling me, if they're on pins and needles, you want to make sure you aim low because he's going to drop your arrow. It was about a 28-yard shot, give or take. And so he said, just make sure you aim, low, like aim at the heart. And so, I made sure to do that because he was kind of on pins and needles. And so I let my arrow go. It hit him. And instantly I was just like, oh, like I felt like it wasn't a good shot. Like I
it
felt
was
like,
a good shot.
I know, but hold on. Instantly my gut reaction was, I hit him high.
Why did you think that? Because the way his body looked?
Because the way he ducked, yeah. And so I'm like, Aaron, we gotta rewind this footage. We let him go off. Of course, he took off instantly. I knew I had a pass through, so we watched it back, and I didn't think I made a very good shot. And then we waited there a little bit, and Pat and Dean came in.
So that's where I need to pick up the story because it was kind of funny because we come in to check on her, and as we pull up, we're like, she's out like signaling like we just maybe bumped him out of there. And we're like, oh my gosh, we hope we didn't mess everything up. And then she starts freaking out, jumping up and down. And the buck was laying like 20 yards away. She didn't even know it.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. No. And you were just, you couldn't believe it. You're like, oh my gosh. So we all, of course, shut the Ranger off and walk over there and help you celebrate. And that thing was a stud. He was a big 170, super cool deer. I should have got that deer. I should have stuck to my guns.
There's a reason you didn't get that deer.
Oh, really?
God didn't want you to have that deer. He wanted me to.
Yeah, I don't want to hear any more sniveling. Okay? You got your deer. Next year's my turn on a bigger one. But again, we doubled down in Saskatchewan on the final hour. And so kind of spurred us on to get back into the Midwest and start whitetail hunting around home. So that's what we did.
Packed our stuff and came home, and it was now muzzleloader season in Minnesota. So we were hunting muzzleloaders.
Shotgun / muzzleloader. Yep. We in Minnesota it's shotgun only, but you can use your muzzleloader. Of course, we use our Thompson Center muzzleloaders a lot of times because you have a little bit longer range than you do with your shotgun. Right. So we a lot of times hunt over these field systems, and if you get the weather, a lot of times that makes those deer move and get up and feed in evening hours. And
it's our favorite time to hunt. One of our favorite times, late season like that, when you get some snow on the ground, cold temperatures. And I kept telling, so I was hunting with Ava. I had dedicated, all of prior season with Ava and trying to get her first deer. And I kept telling her, like, if you hang in there, the colder the weather we get, the more snow we get on the ground, we're going to get our chance, And she passed on
some really nice deer.
Unbelievable bucks, and
we were kind of hoping to shoot a couple particular deer that were kind of on the list, and we had some that we wanted to try to grow, but we weren't going to really hold her off on those either.
There was really only one buck that we had said, we just want to let him grow because he's got such good genetics, and of course
that's the deer walks
that
out.
That buck's the one that comes out in front of her.
I know. I remember how frustrated you were. And you should just quickly tell the story why Ava is such a special person to us in a way that we can get through it and just talk in how special she is to us in our family.
Yeah. So this last summer we had a tragedy at our house here. Carson, our son Carson, his best friend, passed away here at our house unexpectedly, and it was a very, very, very tragic event. And, that night, Ava, of course, was there. And she's 10 years old. And to see her that night,
going through that.
Right. And the tears and just the confusion of what it just happened and trying to grasp it all. And, just to see the whole Miller family come together and, just embrace themselves in the Deming side. It was amazing for Pat and I to see that family support that they had going through such a tragic event like that. And, in the weeks after that, Pat and I both said, what can we do to continue, to help this family? What can we do? Right. Mm-hmm. And, one thing was Ava had never shot a deer before. She had never really hunted before. And
they're a hunting family.
they are. And so, Aiden was a huge hunter. Him and Carson were like two peas in a pod. I mean, those two out there were like two little girls, honestly, out there hunting. I mean, there was nothing like it. It was comical every single time. And there were always plenty of stories to tell when they got back. And so, we approached Dan and Karen, Ava's mom and dad, and said, we don't want to step on your toes whatsoever, but would you mind if Nicole took Ava out hunting to get her first deer? And Dan said that would be awesome. Being a farmer, I don't get a whole lot of time in the fall to dedicate to hunting. So he's like, absolutely, hands down, I would absolutely love if you did that. So,
and Ava can then, you can relate because, two girls out
right,
hunting.
Right. And I am here to tell you that little girl is quite the deer hunter. I mean, she is such a special little girl, and she will always hold a very, very awesome place in my heart, because me getting, all the hours spent in the blind with her. I mean, she is a hunter through and through. She's got it in her blood. She never complained once. She carried her load. She did what she had to do. I mean, there were some nights we walked, 500-600 yards to get into a blind. She's carrying, at 10 years old, she's carrying her gun and her bog shooting sticks and everything else. Never complained once.
And they knee-deep snow
sometimes. Right.
Cold.
And we'd be frozen. We'd have to stop and warm our fingers up on the way to the blind and things. And she did phenomenal. And
I think it was the snacks that carried you both through.
I think that's right, too. But I'll never
Plus
forget.
the squincher.
Right. I'll never forget that night that deer walked out. And I'm like, and our cameraman Aaron was with us. And I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you, Jesus. Like, this deer walked out, and I'm like, Ava, this is your buck. I mean, she stayed cool as a cucumber, I mean, I stuck her. One thing Dan had told me was that she was scared of shooting a gun because of the noise. Yep. So I told her, I have Caldwell ear protection, so I'll put that on you. If we see a deer you're going to shoot, I'll reach over, put him on you, and, and I'll make sure to cock your hammer for you. So that's exactly what I did. That girl never flinched. I mean, she was cool as a cucumber, and I said, okay, just take a deep breath, and whenever you're ready, wait till he turns broadside and just squeeze the trigger. And she absolutely made the most perfect shot ever. That deer whirled around, took off into the woods. He went down not even 10 yards into the woods, did not go anywhere. And it was such an amazing, special night. It was the night before her 11th birthday. And still this day, I tell Ava, I'm like, that was your birthday from your big brother in heaven. I mean, it was pretty special to be able to share that time with her and, just have the influence. And I honestly think she is a hunter from here on out, because she loved every second of it. And like I said, she'll always hold a very special place in my heart.
Yeah, after shooting your first big moose at 4 yards and everything else that happened this year,
it doesn't even remotely come close. Nothing.
That hunt stands far and above the rest of them, and does for all of us here at Driven, for sure.
Right.
We were all like sideline.
Everybody was just so rooting for Ava to get a deer this year. Like, all the kids, everybody just wanted Ava to get a buck.
Yeah, and they all came. Everybody came here, and we got to celebrate and share in the celebration together. And of course, I'm sure, like you said, her brother up in heaven was looking down and smiling too. So. That one was a heart wrencher, but it was so awesome. I mean, happiness was abound.
Right, and I think that's the highlight of Ava's year, as far as just helping her get through that, and that, and she was so excited to go to school and show her friends, a picture of her big buck and stuff, and she needed that. She needed that pick-me-up in her life, and like I said, that I think we all did, I mean, to see Dan and Karen's face and their happiness, and her two older brothers and older sisters, she's the youngest of all the kids, and all of her big brothers and sisters all came out to see her big buck, and it was really cool to be able to see that family come together and, support her like that. It was really neat.
So, and she wasn't the only special girl that had some luck in the field this year, because we had two other special ones that were hunting as well during the same period, and they were hunting hard themselves. They were. We had Ashlyn Schumacher, which is, of course, Chad and Amy's daughter, and her brother Jace had already got a deer early. So
there was a little competition going on there.
She was worried she wasn't going to get a deer. And then, of course, Isabel, our daughter, she was hunting like crazy. And Isabel put in a lot of time this year hunting and trying to. We were kind of after we had a couple bucks on the hit list, and we're hunting the same field a lot of times that you and Ava have been hunting.
Yeah.
We're hunting some kind of different times when Ava couldn't hunt, then
Right.
Isabel, we would kind of switch off. So, and there was this one buck that just showed up out of the blue that was kind of a non-residential deer that we hadn't had a lot of history with, and he
very mature.
he started showing up
Yeah.
because of all the food and the low pressure hunting we were doing, and he became real regular. I'm like, wow, if we get a chance at this deer, he was, I estimate him, he's definitely 4.5, but I think he was probably even 5, just judging by his body. We're kind of holding out for that deer, and just as luck would have it, we had a night where the weather was kind of bad. I didn't think we'd even really see a whole lot just because it was real windy, which sometimes you just don't see a lot of big buck activity during super windy conditions on food sources. They're just too nervous, so they don't come out. But it was rainy, sleety, kind of just a nasty night. We got in the muddy blind, and we're sitting there. And I remember just because of the rain and sleet and stuff, it was kept messing up our windows, so we couldn't see through them very well. And then Isabel kind of looked, and she's like, "Dad, there's a big buck." And I was kind of trying to visually see through it. So I just we were been sitting there with the windows closed because the wind was completely wrong. We had our nose jammer, of course, and our zero trace going, but it was a bad wind that night too for deer coming out in this one spot. And all of a sudden she saw a big buck out there. So I visually had to open up the window. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's him. So I kind of closed it back up, and I told her, I says, okay, you get ready. And I want you to be, when I open your shooting window, which is a vertical window in the right corner, when I open that, I want you to,
you gotta be ready.
Yeah, I want you to be aiming. And I opened it up, and her gun was on the bog sticks. She was shooting a Thompson Center, that pink 50 caliber that you like so much, that Encore, and she was aiming, and she was right on it right away. And then I got on it with the camera, and the buck was feeding, and he hadn't smelled us yet, and you could tell almost instantly when he got us. He was feeding, and all of a sudden he picks up his head, and he just starts putting his nose in the air, and he just all of a sudden, like, his demeanor changed. He nervously turns and starts walking to the woods, like, oh boy, I'm getting out of here. I'm going back into this cover, and I stop him by just bleating at him, and she's like automatic.
A perfect shot.
Yeah, she just drilled the thing, and it happened kind of like in slow motion. So we were like, "Did we get him?" I don't know, because he just ran in the woods. So everything happened so quick. All these other deer ran, and I'm like, she goes, I felt good. So we rewound it, and then I saw where that bullet hit. I'm like, oh, you smoked him. So we were so pumped, and we, of course, then it started kind of snowing, and the weather even got worse. And so we got to blood trail him right away, but he didn't go 50 yards, and he was dead inside the woods. And she was so happy because she put so much time and effort into it. And Ashlyn, the night before had got a big buck.
Yeah.
So I put all the pressure on Isabel to get a deer of her own, which you're a 14-year-old girl, and I didn't know what kind of competition you guys had when you were younger, but these girls, they put a lot of competition on each other for shooting big deer.
I mean, definitely a girls' weekend. It was all three of the girls. Ashlyn kicked off the weekend. That Friday night shot hers. Isabel shot hers Saturday night, and then Ava shot hers on Monday night. So it was like within a 4-day span, we had 3 big bucks on the ground, and all of them had been hunting really hard all fall long. And
Ashlyn's deer was just a giant.
It was.
I mean, Carson. I said to Carson, hey, you need to go film Ashlyn and Chad. They went and got in the blind, and this buck walks out, and Chad's like, that's my biggest buck on my hit list. And he wanted to shoot it, and now his daughter's aiming at it, and they're having a little back and forth, and he's like, go ahead and shoot it. And so she shoots it, drills the thing, and then we went and helped recover. It was so much fun to just be around. And, yeah, the kids, again, they just had an amazing year.
Right.
And so now that our season was made at that point. I mean,
Right,
Ava got her deer. That's all that matters.
That's right. All of our kids are now tagged out.
Right.
So, and when you have as many kids as we do, it's a task to try to get them all tagged out. So all the kids are tagged out. Pat and I are to the point where we're like, if it happens for us in Minnesota, it happens. But if it doesn't, our season's already been made. But now we have, right. Yeah. So now we're packing up. And this is our first year ever going south during like the November time period, but we're going to a warmer spot and we're headed to Oklahoma. First time ever hunting Oklahoma with Garrett and Name the Game Outfitters. And it was a blast. I mean, what a fun hunt.
Yeah, I've never hunted Oklahoma. I've heard that it's a state that has really good deer,
Right.
but we didn't know anything about it. Didn't know about the terrain we're going to be hunting in. But this is our first time really hunting outside of, hunting big game with our Browning rifles.
Yeah, for whitetails.
And that's kind of the reason we wanted to go down and just try a rifle hunt because we hadn't done one forever. And so we took our rifles, the same rifles we used when we were up in Caribou Camp, and went down and started hunting with them in Oklahoma. And the first couple days we sat in stands, and we were seeing deer, but every time we get in a stand, Garrett was texting or calling us saying, "Oh, I just saw a giant. He's locked down with a doe." And I finally had enough of him saying that. I say, "Garrett, if you're seeing that many, when you leave us,
Right.
we need to change our strategy and not just sit in one location. We need to get out and do some spot and stalking." So that's what we did. And on I was like third day, in the morning, we did not go sit on stand. We started just going to High Point and glassing. And we spotted this deer out in this open, and he was with a doe.
And cattle pasture really is
yeah,
what it was, yeah.
Big high grass,
Right.
wide open country, and we got around, used drainage to get close, and got up there, and he was just dogging this doe all around. And at one point, he dogged her almost completely off the property, but then he corralled her and got her back, came right back, and finally got within rifle range, and you made a great shot, and just a cool deer with stickers. And
Right, he had turkey foot on one side, but the craziest part is hunting that is, you're trying to stay low enough, but the grass is so tall, and my problem was shooting off my knees. I wasn't tall enough, to be able to see, and clear as vitals. So, just hunting that terrain versus hunting here, in Minnesota and stuff, it was neat to see.
Oh, you, of course, had your bog, shooting
Right.
sticks, the dead shot system. That field pod, I mean, it gives you that stability,
It's
and
dead
you could
steady,
get up high enough, kind
Right.
of get into the scope, which turns out it worked great for us.
Right.
And what's funny is as we were kind of taking care of your deer and field dressing and tagging it, we saw another big buck and a long ways off come out of this woodlot and corral this doe, and another big buck come out and challenge him. They got in a fight. And then they all kind of ran back off and up into this timber. And I said to Garrett, "Hey, let's go after them."
Right.
And that's what we did. We decided to put a move on them. We didn't know where they were, didn't know where they went. But we just, one thing I learned a long time ago is you be aggressive. You never know when it can pay off because it's the middle of the day.
That's right.
Nothing else going on. So we start still hunting our way through the timber with the cameraman. And as we were walking through there, all of a sudden we had went quite a ways. We had probably walked a mile or so, and we're just kind of still hunting along this timbered ridge, kind of open, kind of spotty timber with oaks and stuff, pin oaks, and I caught a flash of a big deer, and sure enough, he was right behind that doe, and he came into an opening, and I made a perfect shot. And,
That's awesome.
hey, we
Two
tagged,
big bucks within just a couple hours of each other.
I mean, it was like, like when it went our way, it went our way.
Right.
And we left Oklahoma smiling.
Yep.
Because we're tagged out on two really nice deer, so
That's
that was
right.
pretty cool. Then we
Headed back to the cold.
came back here to Minnesota.
Yeah, we were here for a few weeks, but of course we had Christmas and all that stuff. So
Yep. We started hunting here. Of course, our muzzleloader season kind of was starting to kind of wrap up, but the weather was really starting to change and get better for us. And we had one bean field that was starting to have big deer show up on it. And there was one really nice deer showing up. So the muzzleloader season and the archery season were kind of combining right there. So as this, I was hunting, and you were watching Cashton, and I was sitting. We had a blind. We were moving kind of all around the field with our tractor because I could pick it up and move it
like
in
different wind
spots
every night.
Yeah, and the deer weren't scared of it.
No,
It was a soft-sided muddy blind, which I've used these before, but I really like them because they get you elevated.
Right.
And if the deer, one thing I learned a long time ago, if the deer can see underneath the blind and see open space, they don't get spooky of it. Now, if it's on the ground, they're a little bit more leery. But yeah, we were just moving around according to the wind, and then we had it in one spot, and this buck comes out, and it's sure enough the shooter, and he's like right in front of me, and I'm waiting for him to get in position to take the shot, and he turns and he blows out of there. He spooks because something off on one side of us spooked him off, and I'm like, I thought, oh my gosh, how could this happen? The buck get away, and I don't get him shot. I was devastated, and I could have shot, probably had a really hard quarter and way shot in the end, but I didn't take it. I thought, well, it's better to be patient.
Right.
But as luck would have it, this is how our season went, I turned around, and my cameraman Jared and I were just discussing. We were sitting there talking, let's pack up, let's get out of here. Dozers started blowing. I'm like, I don't know what spooked him. And then I realized what spooked him because I kind of looked out to the left, like, I wonder if it was a coyote or what. I look, and here it's a bigger buck. And I'm like, and he's like on pins and needles because he's like, I don't know what everybody's blowing about and spooked.
Right.
But he's on high alert, and I'm like, so I can't reach down and get my binoculars to identify what it is. So I'm trying to, like, I got bad vision anyway, so I'm like looking, squinting, and I'm like, that is the buck that you had the sheds off for the last couple of years. We had a lot of history with this deer, but he had vanished. And all of a sudden he's standing.
Had one trail cam picture of him.
Yeah, he's 6.5 years old, and he's standing right in front of me for the first time all year. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's him. I thought he was gone.
Right.
I get the Thompson Center up and get it poked out the window, and I'm like, please don't move. And then he goes back to feeding.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, thank you. And I wait, and finally he kind of like picks up his head, and he's like, he's still kind of edgy, and I drill him and just drop him. And I'm like, oh my gosh. How did that happen?
High, low, high.
Yeah. It was like, it was crazy emotion. What a roller coaster. And so I had my Minnesota buck, tagged.
Yeah.
But I also knew that the buck that I just about shot was still there, obviously, because I didn't get him. And I knew you could get a crack at him.
Right.
Of course, that was the end of muzzleloader season for us. Mm-hmm. So you had to do it with either archery gear or nothing.
And then our Iowa season was also kicking in.
Yeah.
So we had late season Iowa muzzleloader tags. So Pat's like, we had 2 days left of the bow season in Minnesota, and he goes, I'm going to Iowa to hunt, and I was going to stay here because we had a huge snowstorm blowing in. And so he's like, that buck is going to be here on this bean field, because he was there religiously every night.
The weather was just teeing up perfect.
Right. I had 2 encounters with the deer.
You whiffed
prior.
him.
I missed a shot right over his back at 35 yards the one time. I didn't equivalate for him dropping. He dropped so much. The one night he was on pins and needles. And the second night he didn't come close enough for a shot.
And we've been jockeying this blind all over this field, back and forth.
And so, yeah, this was second to last night of archery season. Wind is 40, 50 mile an hour, blowing sideways. And I had Carson filming me. First time Carson's ever filmed me. And we get out there and get up in the blind. I get up there first, and there's a flipping mouse in the blind.
I knew there was going to be another mouse story.
And I have a high-speed come apart, of course. And Carson's dying laughing. And I'm like, listen, do you want me to cook you dinner tonight or not? Quit laughing at me. Yeah. And
I mean, to a big trophy bucket or blow the whole deal and make all kinds of noise over a little mouse.
Oh,
crazy.
So anyways, we shooed the mouse out of the blind, and
I'm not getting in that net, flipping my blind until you get that mouse out of there. It's like a grizzly bear's in there.
Right, poor Carson. I'm like, you make sure that mouse isn't in there. So Carson did the dirty work and figured it out and got everything taken care of
then
for
when you
me.
get
And
Nicole in the blind, she's like this.
that's what Carson said.
She's
Carson's
just
like, I don't think
looking
your
in
head
every
quit
direction
moving.
nervously, except for where she needs to be focusing in, where the deer might come from. She's still worried about the mouse.
Well, it's 40, 50 mile an hour winds, so I'm like, okay, these deer are starting to come. It's snowing sideways. And all of a sudden, the snow kind of quits, but it's still super, super windy. And we look up, and here he comes. I mean, just on a string, right? He's coming through the woods.
Right,
He's like 80, 90 yards out, walking right into the beans.
He's a cool,
and
tall,
just
real
a really
funky
cool
looking
deer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, game on. Here we go, Carson. He came out, and I will say I've been bow hunting for many, many, many years, but I guess I've never been in the situation with the high windage and that, and accounting for that. I mean, a total rookie mistake on my part.
Yeah, you just put your pin right behind his shoulder. And
Correct. Perfect.
Think about the wind.
That's right. I mean, he's at 30 yards. I put my pin, my 30-yard pin on him right behind the shoulder, and I let it go, and the arrow flew beautifully, but it flew like 8 inches to the right and sinks in right in front of his back hip. I mean, perfect up and down, exactly. It just, the windage had taken it. And I was
that
like,
sounds like an excuse to me.
I mean, my heart just dropped. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And I mean, I fell apart. And I told Cars, I said, the deer is gonna die. I mean, there's no doubt about it, the deer is gonna die. But it's just the fact of finding him, because the snow had stopped, but we had another 5 to 6 inches coming in that night. And a deer shot in that location is not going to die right away. And so...
No, you got to give him time.
Right. And time means we got 5 to 6 inches of snow coming in.
Oh, that's
going to cover up any sign of tracks.
Any
blood, anything.
So you don't know where he's going.
No, you're just going to start gridding.
Yeah, and we got in this big timber country with a lot of hills and valleys and places for these deer to hide.
So I called Randy Baker, our team. Well, I called Pat, and Pat's like, call Randy. And Randy lives in, about half hour away from us. And I call him, and I'm like, I really don't want you to get on the roads. He goes, I have a 4-wheel drive truck. I'll be there. And, so we knew it had been a couple hours. It had been about 3 hours since I shot him. And we knew we were going to have to go really slow and really quiet. But once again, it was like 50 mile an hour winds. So we knew we could get in quiet enough. But we trailed him about 100 yards or so, and he started dipping off this giant ledge. And I told Randy, I said, I just don't feel comfortable about going after him anymore. So we backed out that night. And the next morning, Randy came back right at daybreak. And once again, we gotten a ton of fresh snow. So no blood, no nothing. And we just kind of started gridding the area. And we did catch like a speck of blood here where it was a sheltered area from the wind and the snow. He would just find like a speck, and we found 2, and that was it. And we just started gridding it. And Randy had to go because he had meetings he had to get to for work. And so he's like, I'm so sorry. But I told Carson, I'm like, it's just me and you. That's it. And so, and his friend Matthew was out, and I told the boys, I'm like, Matthew, you go this way. Carson, you go this way. I'm going to go this way. And we're just going to grid this entire area. And you're just looking for a dead deer now, really. And
yeah, with snow on top of them.
Right. And I will never forget. I just hear Carson just start hollering. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you have to be kidding me. And he is just like hooping and hollering. He's like, you'll never believe it. I found him. And it was a great feeling.
He went quite a ways.
He did. Yeah.
Probably 600 yards.
Yeah.
600 yards.
And he had not been dead that long when we found him. And that was the next morning. So I'd shot him that night, and that was all the way the next morning, probably about 10:30, 11 o'clock when we found him.
Yeah, and we went on, and one of the things that we've done this past year is we've been a part of DeerCast.
Yep.
And DeerCast has a deer track app.
That was huge for us.
And you can go on to DeerCast, and if you hit an animal, you can go in there and check out similar situations or similar hits, and they tell you what to do. And that thing was spot on because that app allowed you to kind of look and say, well, leave for 8 hours. And that's how long it really took that deer.
Right.
Even though you went kind of did a preliminary
And as a matter
search.
of fact, the app actually said a little bit longer, but we were leaving for Iowa too. So I told Pat, I'm like, I got to get out there and look for this deer.
You had shot him the night before at 5 o'clock, and you were out there the next day at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. So, I mean, it's still sufficient time. They might not be dead, but they're not going to be super,
right. Especially
alert.
a cold night like that he had to live
Yeah,
through.
he stiffened up, and they're going to
Right.
be sick. So if you do see him, you're still carrying your bow. You can finish him off and get up
Right.
close to him. But he was dead, but he hadn't been dead long. And, yeah, I mean, hey, you got
That's
him
pretty
done.
awesome. It
Got
was.
it done last second in Minnesota.
Yep.
So
Yep.
congrats.
So then I packed up and headed to Iowa with you. And
Right. Where it was 60 degrees.
I was just going to say it was the last hunt of the season, my second year in a row getting a tag in Iowa, late
That's the
season
toughest
muzzleloader,
part.
and both you and I had them this year. So
We're hunting.
It was
We're hunting down with Bo Jensen of Lamb Pros and his dad, Greg, and Don and everybody down there. And they got a wonderful farm in Decatur County, which is about an hour south of Des Moines. And but they got smoked with the EHD. I mean, it just annihilated their farm, decimated of all mature deer. They all died early on because of
which was
the EHD
so
issues.
sad because the year before all
some
the big
nice
bucks we saw.
Yeah,
the year
we
before.
saw a lot of them, and you never dropped the hammer on anything the year before either. So 2 years in a row, we hadn't had luck, and we get on there, and there's only a few on the hit list
Right.
that Bo said we could shoot. And now it was so warm. And it wasn't like up here where you just shot a deer in the snow and
Right.
the cold temps. We get down there and it's 50, 60 degrees, but Bo's like, hey, don't worry. These deer are fair weather deer. Even big bucks will come out in the warm. I didn't believe him until I was sitting there and we'd passed on some nice 3-year-olds, but nothing mature. And he had this one deer kind of on the edge of his farm that he wanted me to shoot. He thinks he was 5.5, maybe 6.5, but he was a really nice deer, 9 point, with some stickers and stuff. So that's the deer I went after and got in the blind, and I hadn't been there long. I mean, not even 10 minutes. And I look up and I couldn't believe my eyes. It was the first deer in the field, and it was him.
And it was early.
Yeah,
Because you got in the blind even earlier that day too.
Right. I don't know why I went there early, but thank God I did, because he came walking out. He was like a fawn. He walked out, and he wasn't going to stay there long. It was like, well, how them deer act down there. They come out and they eat a little bit, and then they turn around and they go back in bed.
Right.
And then it maybe come back out right at dark, but he was just out there to get a bite. So he was feeding, and he was still too far. He was like 285, and I just I didn't feel comfortable about shooting that far. And if, I just put this new Vortex scope on there, so I felt real comfortable at different ranges, and because it had different increments in the reticle. So I kind of knew, where my comfort zone. I was like, if he's 250 or under, I feel comfortable. And he kind of reappeared again, and I'm like, he's still at 285, and then he just finally crossed his ditch, and if he got to the back end of this one field, he'd be at about 230, 240 yards, and sure enough, he came out. I hit him with the rangefinder. He's 235, and he stopped, and I was just dead steady on him. I'm like, here we go, and I just squeezed off, and that deer didn't even react. He didn't flinch. He didn't buck up, or he didn't leg kick or nothing. He just took off, and he bounded through the timber with his tail up. And then he went back through this other little field where he came from, and I was like, I don't think I hit him. And as I saw, as he was going out of sight, I kind of seen him kind of running sideways or kind of heavy, and I'm like, oh my gosh, am I seeing things? I didn't know for sure, but I thought, if that's him riding sideways, that's a good sign.
Right,
So
that's what you want to see.
we got down and we walked down there, and he was piled up right in the corn, and he's a stud.
And the rest is history. I ate another tag sandwich.
Yeah. And Nicole, for the second year in a row in Iowa, ate hers. Yeah. I mean, you saw a lot of deer. We had fun, but just couldn't get as lucky as I did.
Just part of it. It was warm late season this year down there.
I started out 2020 with a big deer in my hands. I can't wait for this next year. But all in all, seriously, it was
our
heck
best
of a
fall.
year.
Absolutely.
I know the stories get long sometimes, but it's fun to recap them. And if you're listening to the audio version, definitely check out the video version, because that shows a lot of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a pretty great year. All in all, I mean, Ava got her first deer. That's all that matters, right?
That made my whole fall.
Definitely. We put that one in the books. And, this year for Driven, it's going to be an exceptional, great year programming, just because of all this great content and storyboards and different things that happened this past year. And you might even see a mouse or two here and there. So we had a great year. Can't wait to look forward to this next year. And, we got some great hunts on the books. And
we do.
I'm pretty excited about stuff coming up. So we can talk about that another time, but we wanted to thank you guys again for listening to the Driven Hunter podcast, and we'll be back again sometime soon with another exciting podcast coming your way.